All right, everybody, welcome back to Untangle. I am humbled and I am overjoyed to have Titus on the call today. A little backstory, and I haven't really done this with anybody else, but I'm like a huge fan. But anyway, but I've known Titus now 5, 6 years.
Yeah, probably 2019 is when I joined DBUX. So, yeah,
Okay,
6 years now.
okay, and I think if ever it's two people that I've met that I was like I have to record their stories. So you're the first of the two, right? But I remember thinking then like I just wish more people heard this story because it is exactly what I tell people. If when you find something you love, you gotta go all in. So I'm not gonna give away all the details, but I just want to say thank you so much for joining my show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's start with Titus. My audience is typically UXers. They kind of run the gamut. People who are thinking about UX, people who have been doing this a long time, and then I'm kind of on this personal mission, talking to people who I hope will pivot out of UX one day. So it's everybody. So can we stop and take a minute and you tell my audience who you are and what you do, and a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I am Titus Leflore. I've been a UX designer now going on 8 years, and I just enjoy what I do. I currently work for Ford Motor Company. Prior to that, I worked for Amazon, PepsiCo, 7-Eleven, City. I really wanted to get a good panoramic view of UX culture just from place to place. And so that's why I kind of jumped around, at least early on in my career.
Okay. What did you do before you came into UX?
I was a graphic designer.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did that transition from graphic design to UX? What was kind of the inspirational moment for you there?
Uh, so to give you a backstory, I took a job here in response to my now ex-wife. She took a job here, so I followed her down here. I sold the house that we had up in Ohio, and we moved down here to pursue her career. Prior to that, I had a career in corporate insurance. I had been working at the same insurance company for over 13, 14 years. And so to me, having to make this big leap was very scary, to say the least. The only thing that I knew how to do that I felt like I could do right off the street was graphic design.
Mhm.
And so I took that up, was able to find a couple of contractual jobs within the first year, and then I was able to work permanently for this agency based out of Dallas. Unfortunately, with graphic design, as most creators know, you don't make a whole lot of money. I took a significant pay cut going from my corporate insurance job to graphic design. And I felt like at that point, I just needed to do something to kind of rebound some of the, money and income that I had lost. And so I would say back in 2017, I began hearing about this thing about UX and UX design and user experience design, and how it takes like both an analytical and creative mindset to come up with solutions for digital problems that a lot of customers have. And I was like, yeah, maybe I can do that. And so I started off just looking at YouTube videos, and it was one particular talking head, as I call him, Michael Locke, that I really focused in on. And I just started designing screens, creating projects that I, thought were, blue sky, pie in the sky type deals, because I really wanted to beef up my portfolio. It was many nights that I spent for hours working on that until 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. At the time, my ex-wife didn't even believe that I would be able to secure a job within the amount of time that I gave myself. But I wrote it down on a scrap piece of paper that I
Hmm.
wanted to have a UX job within 6 months. So I was only going to give myself 6 months to prepare for the role of UX design. And if that 6 months came before I was able to pivot, then I would have to regroup to figure out, okay, what my next steps are. My goal was to make sure that I took care of my family. And I don't think that I was really leveling up at that point. And so for me, it was about, taking care of my family, taking care of my household. That was really the main motivator for me wanting to pursue UX. So after 6 months, began socializing my portfolio. Got my first call from City. Did really well in the interview. The thing is that I was green, and so they didn't. They had some reservations about taking me on, but because I told them I'm willing to learn, I'm open to collaborating. I'm really eager to really get into UX design. They took a risk and they hired me.
Wow. Okay. So, one of the things that I hope that people take away from your story is how much time you spent learning the craft.
Yep.
So, you said you worked till 3, but like what time were you sitting down to like really dig into learning the space, practicing, building your portfolio? Like how much time were you devoting to doing this?
I'd say out of the week, I would probably spend about 5 or 6 hours almost every day just reading something about UX design or actually doing an exercise in Sketch, looking at other people's design work and critiquing it and finding out, is there opportunities to improve the experience? I'm very visual too, so it was very important to me to not only have a functioning product, but also something that, looks good, that people will want to engage with and want to use.
So when you went and you built out your portfolio and
Mhm.
then you had to show it, right? Can you talk to me about the first couple of times you showed your portfolio? What type of feedback did you get?
Oh, I got some pretty harsh feedback from a few people. Okay. And it was the first time that I would socialize my portfolio, so I didn't know what to anticipate. I've been, on my grind for the past several months. I just wanted to present something that I felt like was ready. And so everything from like fit and finish was off to, button sizings was not correct. I wasn't using the HIG from Apple for some of the mobile app projects that I created. That's the kind of feedback that I got. And I felt like at that point it was a little harsh, but I needed to hear that to help refine my craft as a UX designer.
That's one of those skills that I always find hilarious, right? Like UXers a lot of times don't want to take critique.
Yeah.
So can you share like some coping mechanisms, right? Because you've given yourself 6 months. So I'm sure it hurt a little bit when you got that criticism, right? Because you thinking you off into the races. So can you share some coping mechanisms you used then and maybe even now when you get critiqued?
Yeah, so one of the things I use that I think is really helpful is just not taking things personal, and kind of leading with the fact that this is an opportunity for me to improve. I'm all about self improvement in any capacity whatsoever. And so if it's really just kind of digesting and listening to what the feedback is and processing it and taking whatever opportunities from that I can, I'm going to do that. At the end of the day, that is not going to um, that's not going to supersede what I know my gifts and my talents are and what my abilities are. But if there are nuggets of information that I feel like is compelling enough to me applying to my daily job, I'm going to definitely take that advice in consideration. And those things have helped me, when I'm talking to a difficult product manager. I currently have one that I'm working with right now, and from other design peers and management.
Let's talk about what went into your portfolio because again, you're starting this exercise before you actually had a role.
Right.
So, what were you putting into your portfolio at that point?
So I have 4 projects that I created, and they were based upon what I felt like things that I was interested in. So one was like a fitness related app. The other one was like a banking app where you can make loan transactions to different people with that app. One was car related, where it was just like a little mini site for an upcoming car. And then another one I think was like a car related news app, which I eventually turned into an actual app that's available in the Apple Store. And so those are projects that I felt like I could really dig in and really, keep my interest in because of the subject matter. And that's what I tell most of my, mentees. Like, if you're starting out, if you like the Sheen app or if you like, Nike or whatever, look at the app, digest it, dissect it, figure out if there are opportunities to improve it, what things you like, what things you don't like, and go from there. Pick things that you know you're going to enjoy working on, because at the end of the day, when you actually start working, you're probably going to work on a lot of stuff that you're not going to like to do. But you have to do, what you have to do in order to solve the complex customer problem.
So I give the same advice, but I give it from a different perspective. So I love that you say to focus on something that will keep your interest, because it can be a grind, right? I usually think about it as from a sense of eventually the goal is to get in front of somebody and you want to be able to tell a good story. But to your point, it also needs to be something that you are engaged in and willing to give your best to. So
Yeah.
that's really good advice. I hadn't thought about it that way. Um, Coming from a kind of a background, and maybe this is why I was gravitated to you, because I wasn't like academically trained to do research, right? I just so happened to be nosy
Yeah.
and bossy, so it worked out for me. So thinking about that, what advice do you have for those individuals who are thinking about pivoting into design, right? Who may not necessarily have gone to school for design?
Yeah. I would tell them the first, if to really focus in on solving the issues at hand and not the creative aspect of it, because most of what you're going to do is going to be involved in deep diving, understanding customer problems, looking at research, being able to synthesize that research, being able to take that research and apply it to an actual solution. And that's where the analytical part of this job comes in. The UI part that most people see, like the finished product, that's kind of like the icing on the cake. But the real work, the real intensity is really digging in and understanding, hey, how can I help this customer get from point A to point B to point C on this website or this web application or this product to make their lives more efficient and or drive revenue for that company, because let's face it, most companies are for profit.
So along those lines, because we'll come back to this here in just a second, but that is one of those misconceptions about design, right? It's about what's on the screen, and like you said, that's the bow on the package.
Yep.
Are there some other things, either misconceptions that you believed or other people believe about design that you want to debunk for my audience today?
The one thing that I think I learned very quickly is that it's not just about pushing pixels across the screen. It takes more thought in what you're doing. You have to be more deliberate in it. Everything from the location of a button in relation to the content area, in relation to the photo, matters. And so for me, it's like I can go out and make pretty UI from now until the cows come home. But if it's not functional, if it's not something that customers are going to use, it's going to be worthless in the market. And so that's what I normally tell my mentees is don't focus on the UI aspect of it. Really understand exactly how and why you're aligning different pieces of content in the hierarchy that they should be in, and really drive the fact that it's really less about your opinion and what the customer and customers are saying. You can't go into any meeting with a stakeholder or PM or even your design leader and say, well, I designed this page because I felt like it looked, really good, to me at that time. You have to be able to substantiate whatever you are proposing with scientific data. If you don't have that, benchmarking other companies that's doing the same thing, that's in the same industry. Those are the things that you really have to do to bolster your claim as to why you're coming up with this hypothesis for this solution that you're proposing.
Something else you mentioned is that there's not necessarily a whole lot of visual creativity in UX design. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Most of what I do as a designer is really just taking bits and pieces, what I call Lego pieces. As you can see, I'm a huge Lego fan. Taking those Lego bricks that are in the form of a design system that most companies will have. It can include buttons, colors, typography, cards, type forms, whatever you can think of that would go on a page. That's what I'm normally working with. I don't have the liberty to say, okay, I'm going to, make this button a gradient because I thought, this looks really dope. I have to take what I am afforded at that company from their brand standards and be able to apply that to a design. So that's where a lot of the creativity goes completely out the window. I can get creative in maybe how things are laid out, from a hierarchical standpoint. But when it comes to actually recreating the experience visually, you're normally very limited.
Um, what was I going to say? I'll come back to it. It will come back to me. Okay. Oh, no, that's the question. So then do you have a creative outlet? Do you have a way to get kind of that visual creativity out?
Yes, I still draw digitally. I draw a lot of my artwork now on my iPad. I used to draw using color pastels and stuff like that. I'm really big into like people, so I normally do like portraits. And years ago, I used to do commissions for people, but I just got burnt out. And then I didn't want to draw somebody's watermelon headed kid. I'm like, I should be able to choose the kind of work that I want to do. But I was
Right.
tired of those requests.
I did not know that, Titus. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so so now you've worked for amazing companies, right? Like the who's who of a lot of these top companies. Um, and along the way, so when you were learning about UX design, I would imagine a lot of those early videos didn't necessarily talk about the business of UX and how you persuade stakeholders. So where did you learn those skills?
That came from my first job at City because
Okay.
that's where, my manager at the time, he told me that, yeah, it's one part work, but it's also one part relationship building. And if you want to have buy-in from a stakeholder on what you're doing, you're going to have to really work to forge a relationship with them in order for you to earn their trust and for them to earn your trust. And so for me, it was like, how can I build relationships with people first and foremost? Because that will help drive any type of interaction I'm having with them for new proposals. I kind of get, a pulse on, how to approach one stakeholder over the other. And so, yeah, that's how I was first introduced to the business sides of things that people don't always tell you about on these flashy YouTube videos.
Right. So, okay, so you started to learn that. We'll come back to relationship building because that's huge.
Yeah.
But like the actual business acumen behind all of those things, did you have resources along the way that you were able to use to kind of learn more about how business works and how UX ties into that?
Yeah, so at the time when I was working at City, and shout out to Michael Tingland, he kind of took me up under his wing. He was just, because he had worked, at a few bigger major companies prior to that too, as well as agency. So he had a very unique perspective about things. And he was the one who kind of shepherded me along and kind of showed me the good, the bad, the ugly when it comes to business and how you have to go in, get in whatever you want, however you can, and then get out because the business does not have a loyalty to you. They have a loyalty to either their shareholders or how much money that they're making.
Right.
So
I,
if you have
go
to
ahead.
you have to play the role that you know that you are destined for, but also you cannot get too caught up in the hype of the politics. Go in, get out, do whatever you have to do a good job, but don't make it something that you feel like could be your life, going forward.
If we could ever get him to speak, he would be.
And so,
I never even worked with Mike, and he taught me the same lessons he taught you, right? I had no idea. I didn't think about it that way. But I think looking back, he probably just like his take on where you fit as an individual into business,
yep.
right? Which is not just your skill set, networking, how you position yourself, but like how you fit into an organization. Had I known that sooner, he probably have saved me some disappointment, right, and some heartache. It is uh, one day I'm gonna get him to speak on it.
Yeah.
Um,
And he's very,
okay,
yeah, what I like about him too, really quick, is that he's very upfront. So I'm a very upfront person myself, but he's very upfront. When I went to go work for him at 7-Eleven, because I followed him from city to 7-Eleven, he told all his designers, and he is mainly singling out one or two that was long winded. He said, "I need you to go in there, be brave, be brief, and be gone.
yeah,
Keep your story concise, on brand, and be up out of there."
yeah. Yeah, he should, like, again, he should do a whole class on executive presence and how to tell the story and leave people wanting more, right, and having that impact. Um, Going back to something you talked about, relationship building. A lot of people talk about this, but again, you've had to live this life. Can you give the audience like some examples of what relationship building looks like, and then some strategies you use to be able to intentionally seek out and build those relationships?
Well, for me, relationship building, and this is going to sound, you know, silly, but a lot of times it's really just like if I'm talking to a PM that I know I have to work with and I think this person can be kind of difficult, I try to infiltrate their network to see what they like. Like, are they a dog lover? Do they, are they into cars like me or something like that? What kind of music they like? Because the goal is to kind of find some kind of common ground with them to make them feel comfortable with working with me as a UX designer. Also, making sure that when we're having those conversations, that they understand that I'm not working for them, I'm working with them. This is a partnership, and we need to make sure that we understand, expectations on both sides in order to make sure we reach, our desired outcome. And so for me, it's, really just trying to figure out, what things kind of make them tick. Sometimes I'll even go on their LinkedIn account and see where they worked prior. And I'll ask some questions about that. Like, how was it working at, this company versus that one? And, whether there were some learnings that they took from them. And that's the one thing I normally do when I start at any new job, is that I set up like one-on-ones with the PM or PMs I'm going to be working with, just as like a way to set the table to really understand, their ways of working, how can we collaborate, and what is the most effective way for getting our jobs done.
Um, it's a lot like research, right?
Yep.
Networking works the same way as research, because sometimes I find people are like, nobody ever asked them about their job. Nobody ever asked them about them as people. So then when you do that, I think you often set yourself apart. And it just kind of, the word I use is humanizes you,
Hmm.
right? So you're not that designer who's telling them we can't do certain things. It's, I'm Titus, I'm a person, right? And we're going to get there together. Okay.
When I
Um,
interviewed at City really quick, the one thing that I left them all with, everyone got gifts. So you talk about a human standpoint. I think I bought them like charge banks and like notepads and some other thing. But I had 8 people that I interviewed with, managers as well as peers, and they all got like a gift at the end of the interview. Just to show my appreciation and it brings some humanness to that process.
and makes you stick out. I've been doing this a long time. Nobody's ever brought me a gift, Titus. Nor did I ever think to take anybody a gift. I might steal that.
Yeah,
If I have if I have to go back out here one day, I'm gonna get gifts,
yeah,
because then I, there's no way they didn't leave from that interview and talk about you, right?
right,
There was no way that was not on everybody. They went home and told their wives and kids about that, right, or
right.
their husbands. Oh, where did you get that idea from?
I don't know. I think for me, when I used to interview, I always used to send a thank you card, even if the interview was trash. Like, and I know I fell on my face, or the interviewer, was terrible. They were just a curmudgeon. They just gave me a hard time. I still would send, at the very least, an email, If I had the address of the office, I would send them a card and just thank them for their time. At the end of the day, whether I get the job or not, I was given the opportunity to showcase my skill set. And that's good practice for going forward. And as I tell most of my mentees, a no today doesn't mean no forever. It just means no today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then and don't shoot yourself in the foot, right? By acting poorly.
Yeah.
I will tell you stories. We won't do it today, but I have seen some things, and it's like, you were number two on the list, right? Like, and you just messed that up for yourself. Okay, so one of the things that I love most about you, in addition to we always have great conversations, is you're always learning something.
Yeah.
So, what topics, what things are happening in the UX space that has your attention right now?
Well, there's this new buzzword that people keep talking about called AI that is all the rage right now. And what I've explained to some people is that AI has been around for a long time. We called it something different in years of yore, but it's been around for years. Um, there is like an impetus for a lot of companies to begin on this AI bandwagon without having a concept of how AI could work for them and their employees. So what I've been doing is I've been looking at tools that I felt like could make my job easier as a UX designer. There's a program that I've been, kind of playing around with that I can put in prompts and tell it, I want you to create a landing page for a Ford Mustang Mach E and have a gallery of images in it in a mosaic form with 3 or 4 different paragraphs of text giving a description. And you can be that detailed and it will spit out like a concept. Now, with AI, nothing's foolproof. So, there would take some massaging of, colors and maybe buttons and stuff like that to make sure that, accessibility is considered. But there are platforms, there are applications out there that could make, let's say I just needed to have like a couple different concept ideas. And I didn't feel like putting that kind of mental horsepower into developing those and cultivating those myself. There are programs out there that can help give you some ideas without you, having to come up with all those ideas from scratch.
So, have any of the ideas that you've come up with using AI, have they ever become real? Like, have you made something, published something, and a good piece of that started as AI?
No. And I think it's just because of the nature of the business. So the work that I do for Ford is non-vehicle commerce. So that
Hmm.
includes parts, accessories, merchandise, things like that. I don't really have the affordance to use AI for that because they're very protective of that line of business because it's such a huge revenue generator for them. Have I maybe suggested that we add certain AI features? Yes. One of the things is like an accessorizer that you can, create like this really souped up Ford Bronco, and you have a 3D image of, what the new grill or what new roof racks is going to look like, all those things. So that's something that can be AI generated that we are working to build towards. And that's something that, that's a project that I'm hoping to take up within the next few months. So as of right now, I haven't had any product to go to market that was using AI or whatever, but it's around the corner.
So, are there any other tools that you are exploring or that you would recommend other designers use, play with, explore in your toolkit?
Yeah, well, Figma is like it's the it platform for anyone going into UX design. When I first started, it was Sketch. XD from Adobe had a small footprint for a little while. Um, and then Figma came in and just blew out everyone, like virtually overnight. And so I do like using Figma, and I tell most of my mentees use the program, create prototypes, prototypes will tell you whether or not your experience is janky. And because a lot of times you can't tell just by looking at flat screens, you need to be able to string those screens together as a customer journey. Um, I also recommend that I have a list of like different blogs and UX related UI type of inspiration websites. Those are things that I would send over to them just so they can get some inspiration because at the end of the day, nothing's new up under the sun. Someone has probably designed for whatever you're trying to solve for in a totally different way. You have the opportunity to look at their work and use that as inspiration, or maybe look at their work and say these are some opportunities that I would take from that. So those are the resources that I kind of look at. Retta Simpson, as you know, is like one of the AI gurus. I follow her on LinkedIn. She always has really good nuggets of information to pass along those lines. And so, yeah, those are things that I kind of recommend.
Are there any underutilized features on Figma that you're surprised people don't use more?
So, yeah, it's the AI stuff, and because it's like it's half baked.
Okay.
It's really half baked, and it's not really easily understood how I, as a designer, can apply it in my workflow.
Mm, okay.
Because sometimes I just need to come up with a design very quick. I have a meeting that I'm going to the following day. Like I can't be over there futzing around with Figma to figure out, okay, how do I create this experience using their generative AI feature?
Hmm.
If it's not right there in front of my face, sometimes I normally just plow through my work as if I normally would.
Do you think the success of Figma is because of its features and functionality or because of its business strategy?
I think both could be true.
Okay.
So when Figma came on the scene, Sketch was kind of like rotting on the vine. They hadn't made any significant updates in years. And on top of that, in order for you to prototype with Sketch, you had to use an outside tool. And that was one of the things that I think handicapped them. Figma came in and they took all that Sketch was not doing, implemented it into one platform, and within the following day they came in and they slammed dunked on it. It was a grand
Yeah.
slam. And since then, what I like about them is that they take a lot of feedback from their designers, like the design community, on new features that they, will implement within the next quarter or even the next year, which is awesome. Sketch didn't do that.
If
So,
only we listened to customers about how they use things.
right.
That was a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
As a researcher, one of the things that I liked about Sketch, and again, I look at it as like it was a feature functionality, but I also thought it was just a smart business move. It was with things like XD. It was, I don't have a way to test this for you,
Yeah.
right? Without jumping through hoops. Figma took care of that. In half the tools we use now, there's a Figma plugin
Hmm.
and done. But yeah, so but I'd laughed and I had forgotten how frustrating XD had been. But then I had a client 2 months ago show up with a prototype build XD. Where where did you get this from? What are we doing? It is surprising. Okay. Um, thinking about your, so you mentor quite a bit.
Hmm.
Um, how did you get into mentoring?
Um, I think someone just asked me one day, would I be willing to sit down with them and, look over some of their designs or really talk to them about UX design to see whether or not it would be something that we both feel like it was a good fit. And so I kind of fell into the role of mentor mentee. I can be a little impatient at times, but I'm very truthful with people. I'm very honest. And I just want to make sure that they're setting themselves up for success. And I'm going to tell you what you need to know, not necessarily what you want to hear.
Absolutely.
It's competitive. It's a very competitive industry. And if I don't tell you, you'll learn soon enough, exactly what you're up against.
What do you look for in a mentee? So when you do kind of, I'm gonna call it a vibe check. You didn't, but when you do the vibe check, what are you looking for in a mentee?
Drive, consistency, curiosity, a thirst for knowledge. Those are really the hallmarks of making, I feel like a really good UX designer. But in order to get to that point, you have to exhibit those things, way before you have your first opportunity. And those are some of the things that I had, when I was, in my design exploration phase of my career without having my first UX opportunity.
Along those same lines, so you as the mentor, but now what about you as the mentee? Do you have mentors? Do you have a board? Do you have people that you go to continue growing and stretching yourself?
Yeah, I do. I do. I have a manager that's actually, he was my manager at Amazon, but we're really good friends. And sometimes I just need a gut check. Sometimes I just need to, have someone check my ego at the door. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes Titus can get a little egotistical, and he's one of those people that will, tell me exactly what I need to know at that time. In the same way, as I mentioned before, Mike Tingler, he'll, kind of rein me in if I feel like, oh, well, I did XYZ and nothing launched or whatever. Because what he would always say, he was like, is the pay the same? He's like, are you going to get a paycheck at the end of the 2 weeks? And I would say, yeah. He was like, well, don't sweat that stuff. Pick your battles. It's a job.
Oh, that's a good one. Let's double click there and talking about picking your battles because I would love to tell people that relationship building always works and trying to be a team always works, but sometimes it doesn't. So, how do we know what battles to pick? How do we know which personalities to either ignore or go head to head with? How do you do that?
Yeah. It really depends on, for me, from my personal standpoint, what the customer impact is going to be.
Mm.
So if someone says, well, I don't like this blue badge on here, I think it should be orange. Do I feel like that has a very low or high customer impact? If it doesn't have a very high impact, and I feel like, at this point, they're just going to really dig in their heels, I'll change it to orange. For me, research has been the great equalizer when it comes to dealing with opinions in a room who will tell you, well, I think it should be XYZ. But if you don't have the data to substantiate why you feel like it should be XYZ, then there's going to be a disconnect when that product launch and customers are having friction points that they're facing because you base it on your opinion. You're not the customer. And so what I normally do for some of those most extreme cases is that I'll do a usability study or something like that and just basically show them the data. I've also done because with this design job, like everyone thinks they're a creative director, even the PMs. So what I will do is I will design what I call their ugly baby, the thing that they want, that they're adamant about, and then I'll put it up against the design concept that I came up with. 90% of the time, Adrian, the stakeholder will go with my concept because I've deliberately explained and explicitly explained how I arrived at this solution, what I think the customer impact is going to be, how I think it's going to drive KPIs, and all those other things. So those are things that I keep and I continue to you know go back to my toolkit for really trying to get through and figuring out the best ways of working.
And I love that because you do, right? And I say the same thing. I don't have to argue with anybody.
Hmm.
I just have to do the research, right? And sometimes part of that discussion is go ahead and doing that. Let's go ahead and test your concept. Let's go ahead and test what you think is correct. And then when it doesn't work, we'll also have this other thing over here, right? And now you'll see how I got there. I think one time I had a VP tell me, she said, you get frustrated because you already know where it's going.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to slow down and let everybody else catch up. And putting the research out there, actually testing those concepts gives people an opportunity to catch up.
Yeah.
Um, Thinking about designers, so I don't know how long ago, we can go back and look. I joined AIGA a long time ago
Okay.
because as a researcher, I couldn't understand why designers didn't get research. We are all trained. We all say that we do the same things, but when it comes to research, that is not the case. So let's talk about you and your journey into research.
Yeah.
So when were you first exposed to user research?
Um, Probably throughout my time at City, because we had like four teams there, and each team was considered a pod, and it consisted of 4 or 5 designers. You had a producer, and then you had like a researcher and content strategist. And so for me, like, research was not the sexy part of the job. Like, I just wanted to go and design some things. I didn't want to have to go out and proof, the stuff that I was doing. But I was green at the time. And that's when the researcher pulled me back. She was like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. We are not going to ship anything until we have, done a couple usability studies, maybe did some A/B testing. And that was like my first foray into research. And when she showed me the results, because I had an opinion what I think should be the right solution, but the research itself dictated something completely different. So for me, it was like, oh, okay, well, it's not the sexiest part of the job, but I do understand why it's so pertinent. So when I do contractual work for people, they say, I want you to design me an app. I tell them, I said, well, a part of the budget is going to consist of research. If they pass on that, then I pass on the opportunity.
Yeah, because you're gonna do the research at some point. You're either
Yeah.
gonna do it before the design or after. It's
Yep.
coming, no matter what, no matter how you do that. So then thinking about, and shout out to whoever that researcher was who got you together. So thank you. Um, so then, but I do still think that there is an art that researchers have to learn about, massaging your message to your audience, and your designers is an audience. So thinking about how you like to get research, is there a certain type of research that speaks to you? Is there the story? Like, how do you like to receive that information?
Um, my favorite is like customer interviews and insights, looking at a customer go through like a flow, having them give their opinion about what things they, feel are easy for them to accomplish versus things that are challenging to them. At Ford, we have also like a repository through Baymard, which I'm sure you heard of, and then we have Dovetail. Dovetail is like a internal repository of all the research studies that was conducted on all the different experiences. So at any given point, I can go in there and look at videos. I can look at reports. I can look at synthesized data to really drill down to the idea that um, I need to create this new XYZ experience, and I need to understand the how and the why in order to get to that point.
Okay, so what was the first one you said? You said before Dovetail.
Baymard.
Okay, okay. No, I'm not familiar with that. Tell us about that one.
So Baymard, it's a very interesting tool. It's a website, and basically it has a ton of different websites listed on there, and it'll have them ranked according to um, best experience versus worst experience.
Okay.
And you can look at different screens that may be relative to what you're doing. Like, I work in ecom, so I can probably find like another e-commerce site that has a product detail page that's similar to mine, and it will basically highlight things that they feel like this is probably um, good based upon customer feedback, the placement of this photo versus this CTA probably should be placed higher or something like that in order to give you an idea. Okay, if I was thinking about designing something from scratch, what does that look like from another e-commerce platform, and what was their success metrics like? So it's very unique. It's great for benchmarking. It's great for, just looking at some other designs that are given a more, I guess, critical, for lack of a better term, critical lens when assessing the experience.
When you say benchmarking in that context, what does that mean?
Benchmarking just means that you're looking at other similar websites, similar platforms, similar products to see what's working well for them and maybe what things are not working well for them. Because in this industry, there's not, like I said, nothing new up under the sun, and you can find commonality. And that's what I tell most people: you work on one e-commerce platform, you go to another. Most of the paradigms are the same. What you're doing is you're just trying to find a way to substantiate your hypothesis for why this works over here. But most platforms, they have fundamentals that are very similar, and so those are the things that I look at as far as like patterns and paradigms to determine whether or not you know this would be a really good um, use case for that particular feature, for that particular experience.
Okay, okay. I asked that question because I think all of our disciplines think of that word very differently. So thank you for that. Um, Titus, what, in your opinion, and this is not an ego question, I just want to really hear your thoughts.
Yeah,
What has made you so successful? Right, like you gave yourself 6 months. Did you make it in the 6 months?
I
I
did.
think so, right?
Yeah.
Made it in the 6 months and have been gainfully employed at like amazing jobs since. So, what has made you so successful?
I think for me, it was that success was the only option.
Mm.
I grew up a very scrappy kid in Youngstown, Ohio. We were poor. We didn't have a lot of money. And for me, coming out of that, I had a stronger want and desire to be successful. And I didn't want to just, be a part of the status quo. I wanted to, rise above that. I also wanted the opportunity to pay it forward with, my mom, who had been there for me from every step of the way. My godmother, same way. I had a couple male role models that I grew up with that really helped pave the way for me. And so for me, those are people that I consider really individuals who really help to impact and shape who I am. And I always feel like I want to do more because they had poured so much into me.
I love that. Okay, so I want to be mindful and respectful of your time. Before I let you go, Titus, is there anything else you want to leave with my audience?
Um, I would say when you go, a lot of what you're going to do when you're a UX designer is proving out your case. It's really, substantiating your argument for why this solution works. What I tell a lot of mentees is that go in there just really confident. Even if you don't know what you're talking about, only you know that. Because I told him early in my career, I said, I went in, I gave presentations to, full on stakeholders, sometimes 10, 12 people, and whatever I didn't know, I made up. But they didn't know it. And so if you go in there confidently, not cocky, but confidently, you'll have a better chance of really winning people over and allowing that to be the foundation for future success in your career.
That is huge. I was talking to a designer and she came up with an amazing strategy, but you could see on her face she didn't think so.
Yeah,
And I was like, I was completely bought in until I saw your face.
yeah,
Right. And I also think as a designer, again, going back to why you're here to make us money.
Right.
If you can't sell you, how are you going to sell me? Right? And it has to be. That's amazing. Thank you so much. Well,
Yeah.
Titus, you have been amazing. I always enjoy our conversations. Thank you for letting me record one of our conversations.
Absolutely.
I'll make sure everybody has your information so they can follow you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Adrian.
All right. Bye.
Yeah.